Title: The Whispering Room. The rain had started long before you reached the edge of town, a relentless downpour that turned the road to syrup and blurred the lines between sky and earth. Your car had coughed its last breath 3 miles back, its engine steaming like a gutted beast. You walked the rest of the way, boots squelching through mud and puddles, guided only by the intermittent flickers of lightning that lit up the ghostly silhouettes of forgotten buildings. You didn't mean to come here. In fact, if someone asked you later, you wouldn't be able to recall turning off the main road at all. The town had no name. At least, none that appeared on your GPS, which had blanked out the moment the rain started. The buildings here were old, not quaint, not rustic, just old in the way that teeth left in the sun for years are old. Pale, cracked, and brittle. You passed empty storefronts with hollow-eyed mannequins behind cracked glass, diners with upside-down chairs and dust-coated pies still displayed like offerings to a god who stopped caring. There were no people, no signs of recent life. Then you saw it. A house, tall and narrow, like a coffin, stood on end. It wasn't abandoned. A warm light flickered in a second-story window, the only light you'd seen in miles. The brass sign nailed to the gate read, Ashbrook House. And beneath it, in curling iron script, rooms available. You hesitated, the hair on your neck prickling. Then thunder rolled in, low and grumbling, and the sky cracked open like a split skull. You didn't have a choice. You pushed the gate open. It screeched like something in pain. The house loomed above you, its timbers blackened with age and wet with rain. Ivy clung to the stone like veins beneath thin skin. As you approached the front door, a shape moved beyond the frosted glass, a flicker, a suggestion of presence. You knocked, once. The sound echoed unnaturally long, as if the house were hollow and vast inside. The door opened inward before your hand dropped. A woman stood there, framed by the yellow glow of a hanging oil lamp. She wore a thick shawl and a long dress that seemed stitched for mourning. Her face was crisscrossed with wrinkles, but her eyes were pale and glassy, not clouded like the blind, but as if they saw too much. "You're wet," she said. Her voice was dry as leaves. "Come inside. The rooms are warm." You nodded, unsure why you obeyed so quickly. The moment you stepped over the threshold, the storm outside seemed to dim. The sound of rain muffled, like it was 1,000 miles away. You felt the warmth of a fire somewhere nearby. "You must be tired," she said. She didn't ask your name. "You'll want room 3. "I don't have any money," you murmured, suddenly embarrassed. "No matter," she said. "Ashbrook House remembers favors more than coins." That didn't comfort you, but it silenced your protest. She handed you a key from the wall behind her. It was black iron, heavy, old-fashioned. The tag was carved wood, notched with the number 3. Her hand lingered when she gave it to you. "There are no mirrors in the room," she said quietly. "They don't like to see themselves." "Who?" you asked. She only smiled. A slow, painful stretch of her lips that looked practiced. It wasn't warm. It was a warning. The staircase groaned beneath your steps, the banister cold and slick with years of oil from long-dead hands. The walls were papered in peeling florals that smelled faintly of mildew and something sweeter, cloying and coppery. Portraits lined the hallway, each one slightly off-kilter, each subject just slightly blurred, as though they'd moved a little when the artist wasn't looking. Some had no eyes at all. Your room was at the end of the hall. The door stood ajar. Inside, room 3 was lit by a single gas sconce flickering on the far wall. The bed was large and old, the wood carved with strange, curling symbols. A wardrobe loomed in the corner, and the window looked out onto darkness, though you knew it faced the street. You stepped inside and felt the temperature drop. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. You shut the door behind you. The silence settled like dust. Your bag, soaked through, landed on the floor with a wet thump. You peeled off your coat and hung it over the back of the chair. The fire you thought you heard downstairs never reached this far. There was no fireplace in room 3. As you moved toward the bed, you noticed something peculiar. The wardrobe door wasn't quite shut. It stood open just an inch. Enough to see blackness inside. You walked over and closed it gently. The click of the latch echoed louder than it should have. Then the whispering began. It was faint at first, like distant voices through a cracked window. Then it grew sharper, like someone breathing words directly into your ear. "Stay," it said. "Let us remember you." You froze, eyes darting to the walls, the door, the floorboards. Nothing. The room looked unchanged. But the air felt heavier, like it had thickened. You pressed your palm to the door. Cool, solid wood. You turned back to the bed. And froze. The wardrobe door was open again. You stared at the open wardrobe for a long time, each second stretching thinner than the last, your heart thudding in your ears like a metronome counting down to something you didn't want to face. The shadows inside the wardrobe were thick and formless, darker than they should have been in a room lit by a gas lamp. There was a sense of movement within them, subtle and slow, like a creature shifting just beneath the surface. You stepped back, one foot, then another, until your calves touched the bed frame. "Hello," you whispered. Why did you whisper? Even as you asked, you knew no answer would come. The whispering resumed, louder now, filling the room like mist. You couldn't make out the words anymore, only the rhythm of them, breathy and insistent, overlapping and circling your mind like vines. You turned back to the door and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't move. You twisted harder. Nothing. It was like trying to turn the bones of the house itself. Locked from the inside? You looked down. The key was still in your pocket. That's when you heard the creak. It came from the wardrobe. Not the wood settling. Not hinges. A creak, soft and slow, like a single bare foot pressing down on old boards. You stared into the gap. And for the briefest, most horrible second, you saw something move. A pale shape, just a suggestion, retreated into the shadows. You stepped away, heart racing, grabbed your coat from the chair, and backed against the far wall. You kept your eyes fixed on the wardrobe. The whispers quieted then, as if watching, waiting. "I'll sleep downstairs," you muttered, though you didn't think you'd sleep at all. But when you reached the door, the key wouldn't fit the lock anymore. You jiggled the key, jammed it harder into the lock, but it refused to turn. The metal teeth scraped uselessly, and with each failed attempt, the whispers surged again, urgency growing, voices overlapping until it was like being caught in a swarm of breath. Frustrated, you turned to slam the key down on the desk, and that's when you saw it. A mirror. Small, oval, and definitely not there before. It sat propped up against the back wall on the wooden writing desk. Its glass was perfectly smooth, framed in tarnished brass. It had not been there when you entered the room. You were sure. The caretaker had said there were no mirrors. You inched closer, compelled despite yourself. As you stared into it, your breath caught. Your reflection didn't move. You lifted your hand, slowly, and the version of you in the mirror stayed still. Its eyes locked onto yours, hollow and sunken. Its lips curled slowly into a grin. You staggered back, breath catching in your throat. The wardrobe door swung wider. You heard it now, wet footfalls on the old wooden floorboards. But when you turned, there was no one there. Only the whispering, now like laughter, dry and rasping. You faced the mirror again. The reflection now stood, hand pressed to the inside of the glass. Yours was still at your side. You stumbled back, away from the desk, knocking the chair to the floor with a clatter. The reflection's hand, your hand, pressed flat against the mirror from the inside, fingertips whitening against the glass. Its mouth moved, silently at first, then slowly formed a word. A whisper, yet not in your ears this time. It bloomed in your mind directly. Let me out. You shook your head, throat dry. No, you said aloud, your voice cracking. No, no, no. The reflection smiled wider. Not like a person smiles. Like a wound splitting open. It stepped forward again, and your heart leapt into your throat as you realized the glass wasn't a barrier. The surface rippled like water. You lunged forward and grabbed the mirror, flipping it face down onto the desk. The whispers rose into a shriek that only you seemed to hear. The glass crackled but didn't break. You backed away, panting. The room was spinning. The wardrobe creaked again. You turned, just in time to see it fully open. And something stepped out. It wasn't a figure, not exactly. It was a shape, humanoid in suggestion, but wrong in dimension. Slender and tall, stretched as though pulled on a rack. Its limbs moved with a marionette's twitch. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, like it was listening. And then it mimicked your last word, no. It sounded like your voice. Exactly like your voice. You backed into the corner. The air was thick. The lights flickered. The shape took one step forward. The mirror began to hum on the desk. The glass pulsed with light. You screamed. Not out of fear, but because something inside you had begun to shift. Like something behind your eyes was being pulled, toward the mirror. The shape stopped. It cocked its head again. And then it whispered, soon. Then the lamp went out. And the room was swallowed in dark. You awoke, or at least, you thought you awoke, to a dim gray light seeping through the curtains. For a moment, you weren't sure if it was dawn or something far more unnatural. The memory of the mirror, the creature, the cold, flooded you like ice water through your veins. You sat bolt upright. The mirror was gone. The desk sat empty except for a single object, the key. You had left it in the lock, hadn't you? Your breath hitched. Slowly, you rose from the bed. Every joint ached. The air felt stale. You went to the wardrobe, it was closed. You didn't remember closing it. A smear of something dark, oily, trailed from beneath it to the middle of the room. It looked like a handprint. Or what was left of one. You didn't want to open it. Not again. Instead, you walked to the door, clutching the key like it might bite you. This time, it turned easily. The latch clicked. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The portraits were all turned toward the wall. Downstairs, the fire still burned. The old woman stood in the same spot as before, like she hadn't moved all night. I trust you slept well, she said without turning. No, you replied, hoarse. There was something in the room. A mirror. And something came out. Ashbrook does that, she said. It has rooms that remember better than others. She turned to face you. Her eyes were paler than before. And now, you realized, she didn't blink. Room 3 especially, she added. It keeps pieces. Pieces? She smiled. I'd be careful. You're not all here anymore. You stared, and for just a moment, caught sight of your reflection in the hallway window. It didn't blink either. You didn't speak again. You didn't ask more questions. Somehow, you knew she wouldn't answer, not in ways that made sense. Instead, you turned slowly from her blank, gleaming stare and wandered deeper into the parlor. There were chairs you hadn't noticed before. Upholstered, threadbare, arranged in a half-circle around the fire. And there were people in them. Or what had once been people. A man in a smoking jacket sat motionless, his eyes like burnt holes in parchment. His chest didn't rise or fall, though his head tilted slightly as you passed, as if registering your presence. Beside him, a woman with a long braid and a nightgown stained at the hem held a porcelain doll in her lap. Her fingers stroked its hair rhythmically, endlessly. You stopped. "Hello?" you said, stupidly, as if you'd stumbled into the wrong hotel lounge. No one answered. But the doll blinked. You nearly stumbled backward. Then the fire popped loudly and your attention snapped to the far side of the room. Another guest sat there, facing the wall. Their body was twisted oddly, legs askew, as though they'd collapsed in place. A wheezing noise came from them, a labored rasp. You stepped closer, compelled. As you rounded the chair, you saw the guest was wearing a black veil. Beneath it, pale lips moved slowly. "Which part did it take from you?" they rasped. "Fingers? Memory? Or did it choose something deeper?" You opened your mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "I had a name once," the veiled figure whispered. "Now I only remember the room. And the mirror. And the taste of smoke when I try to wake." Your legs carried you backward, toward the front desk again. The old woman was still there. "Who are they?" you asked. "Guests," she said. "Like you. Some checked out. Some never will." You stared at her. "I want to leave." "Do you?" she asked gently. "Then tell me, what direction is the door?" You turned. And realized there wasn't one. Not anymore. You stood frozen, facing the blank wall where the front door had once been. You reached forward with one trembling hand, half expecting to find wood, or glass, or even the brass handle, but there was nothing. Only faded wallpaper and cold plaster. Behind you, the fire cracked again. The guests whispered among themselves, a papery rustle of voices. You didn't dare turn around. Instead, your eyes caught something new. A narrow stairwell had appeared beside the grandfather clock at the end of the hall. You were certain it hadn't been there before. It wound downward, its mouth like a yawning wound in the house's anatomy. No banister. Just slick stone steps vanishing into dark. The old woman tilted her head slightly. "Ah. It's opened for you," she said, as if commenting on a flower blooming. "What is it?" you asked, voice hoarse. "Where the forgotten go," she said. "Ashbrook keeps them. Below." "Why would I go down there?" "Because up here, the house already knows you. Below, it might forget you, if you're very lucky." You swallowed. The veiled figure across the parlor shifted slightly, as though reacting to the word forget. Their wheezing grew sharper. You looked at the stairs again. Cold air drifted up, metallic and foul. Yet something tugged at your spine, a deep, aching pull, like gravity rewritten. One of the guests spoke then. The man with burnt parchment eyes. "She's right. You'll go." We all did. Eventually. You turned back to the stairwell. And descended. The stone steps were slick beneath your feet, each one sloping downward just enough to unsettle your balance. There was no railing, no torchlight, just the cloying scent of damp rot and iron filling your nose. The deeper you went, the less the house above seemed to exist, like a dream bleeding away in the waking world. You counted the steps without meaning to. 23. 42. 60. You stopped at 79. Because the whispering had started again. But this time, it wasn't around you. It was inside you. Threads of thought not your own coiling through your mind. "We remember the ones who forget," they murmured. "And we keep them safe, deep in the belly of the house." You wanted to scream, but your mouth stayed shut. You wanted to climb back up, but the staircase behind you had vanished. There was only forward now. And the door. It was set in a stone wall slick with condensation, its frame warped and blackened like it had survived a fire. Carved into the wood were the same curling symbols that adorned the bed in room 3. Your hand rose of its own accord and turned the iron handle. The room beyond was cavernous. High ceilings arched like the inside of a cathedral. Candlelight glowed softly from sconces on every wall, yet the shadows clung greedily to the edges. Figures stood in rows, unmoving. Statues, maybe. But then one turned its head. You stepped back instinctively. It was a man, or had been, a face half erased by time and grief. He wore tattered clothing and something like a name tag on his chest. It read N01. The others began to turn. Silent. Staring. And then they whispered in unison. Room 3 remembers. You clutched your head. The pressure was immense. Not pain exactly, presence. Like hundreds of thoughts vying for space in your skull. One stepped forward. She looked like you. Almost. You stared at her, the one who looked like you. Not an identical copy, but something far more unsettling, a reflection tilted slightly wrong. Her eyes were too wide, her smile too patient. She walked as you might walk in a dream, where motion has no cause. I don't remember you, you whispered. But I remember you, she said. Her voice was yours, softened by distance and time. You left me here. I've never been here before. She tilted her head. Haven't you? Room 3 remembers what you forget. That's why you came. Behind her, the other figures watched in silence. Their eyes had no whites, just glimmers of silver light like candle reflections on black water. You shouldn't have opened the mirror, she continued. That's how it begins. It only needs a glimpse. And now, the rest of you, belongs to down here. No, you said, voice shaking. I'm leaving. I'm getting out. She smiled, and you hated how comforting that smile was. Then you'll have to find the pieces you lost, she said. Your reflection. Your memory. Your breath. What does that mean? The figures parted silently. Behind them was another stairway, steeper, narrower, leading even deeper. The woman, you, gestured toward it. Every level takes one thing. You gave the first freely. The rest, Ashbrook will take in trade. You looked down the stairwell. Cold air rose from it like a sigh. What's at the bottom, you asked. Your other self answered. Whatever's left of you. You hesitated. Then stepped forward. The stairwell was barely wide enough for your shoulders, carved from stone veined with black streaks that pulsed faintly as you passed. The light dimmed with each step downward, swallowed by the heavy dark. You didn't count the steps this time. There was no point. Time didn't seem to pass the same way here. When you reached the bottom, the air was different, thicker, but somehow emptier. Like the breath had been sucked from the room long before you arrived. A door stood ahead, this one made of bone-white wood with a handle shaped like an open mouth. You reached out and turned it. The door swung inward with a groan. Inside was a chamber lit by nothing and yet not entirely dark. The walls pulsed with dim veins of crimson, as though the house had a heartbeat. And in the center of the room stood a table. Upon it, 3 objects, a mirror, a candle, and a small leather pouch. A voice filled the chamber, your voice, but older, distorted. Choose. You stepped forward. What are these? The mirror is your reflection, what the house has taken. The candle is your memory, it flickers, fragile. The pouch holds your breath, the last piece that binds you to the waking world. If I take all 3? Then the house will take you. You swallowed. The candle's flame bent toward you, trembling. The mirror was dark but shimmered at the edges. The pouch rose and fell slightly, as if something inside it breathed. You reached for the candle. Warmth touched your fingers. Memories surged, a birthday cake, a sister's laugh, a broken arm in childhood. Tears rose unbidden. You clenched your jaw and pulled back. Next, the pouch. It was heavier than expected. When you touched it, you heard your own voice, your real voice, gasping. Choking. You dropped it. Finally, the mirror. It cracked as your fingers brushed the glass. A single word echoed. Remember. And the walls began to close in. The house had made its choice. The chamber trembled. Dust fell in soft sheets from the unseen ceiling. The candle flared violently, then extinguished. The pouch split open with a sigh, releasing a long, hollow exhale that echoed like a death rattle. And the mirror, your mirror, shattered completely, shards hanging in the air as if suspended in water. And through those shards, you saw yourself. Hundreds of you. Each reflection slightly altered. Some smiling, others screaming. Some with eyes gouged out. One mouthing words in reverse. But one was you. True. Whole. Afraid. You reached toward it instinctively, fingers outstretched. And the chamber pulled. It wasn't like falling. It was like being poured. Your body disintegrated, awareness stretched across glass and breath and flame. You became every whisper in every wall of Ashbrook House. You were the eyes behind the portraits, the creak in the stair, the breath behind the wardrobe door. And still, deep inside, you watched. Watched as the candle relit itself. Watched as the pouch sealed and vanished. Watched as a new mirror appeared on the table, polished, empty, waiting. And somewhere, far above, the front door of Ashbrook House creaked open. Boots squelched across the floor. A traveler's voice called out, uncertain. Hello? You whispered through the walls, through the keys, through the floorboards. Stay. And the house welcomed its next guest.